God of War celebrates its 20th anniversary on the 22nd of March, so we're looking back on 2 decades of the iconic series and reflecting on how much Kratos has grown in today's episode of the PlayStation Access Podcast. Hello and welcome to the PlayStation Access Podcast, the official podcast of PlayStation UK. I am your host, Rob Pearson. Joining us today, we have David Jackson.
Hello.
And Nath and Dave again.
Hello.
It's got to be stopped.
He's back.
I'm sorry. It's just she'll be better soon. She'll be back, and yeah, that'll be sorted.
It's not just that, Nath. It's that you're old, and this.
And today we're talking about time.
We are talking about time because, believe it or not, actually today, if you are listening to this podcast on the day it comes out.
It's not today, Rob.
On the day it comes out, the 22nd of March, it's God of War's 20th anniversary.
Wow.
20 years since God of War came out on PS2 in America.
And that makes me feel fine.
So we are going to reminisce, we are going to celebrate.
Yes.
And we're just going to have a chat about one of the greatest series, possibly the greatest series on PlayStation.
Have we got anything to tear in half? Or we got any, can I stab anything in the eye? Can I climb a giant? What have you arranged for us for this celebration?
Just some discussion points. So you can talk about all those things
on a small agenda.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I thought it would be fun for each of us to very quickly remember what we were doing in 2005.
As the oldest, can I go first?
Go on then.
Excellent, because it's hardest for me to remember. What I was doing in 2005 was I had started a job in 2004 on my first job in the games media on
Oh my God, you were already...
official PlayStation 2 magazine.
So you're 20 years plus into your games career.
Yeah, but I left. So I did it for a little bit and then I left to go back to study again. So I was doing a PhD, which I never finished in cinema, but I was freelancing. So I was writing. Right. So I was kind of still attached to the industry. So I saw God of War. If I'd been working on the magazine, I'd probably got a copy. So I did. So actually, what I remember is not getting a copy. Oh, I haven't got a copy of God of War.
I can imagine even now you'd be annoyed about that.
It's the biggest thing in the world.
You know, as in your early 20s,
when I actually had time to play games.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So it was. That was what I was doing. I was playing lots of games. Really liked action games. So I didn't actually play it for about a year or two after it came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
What I was going to say was, it seemed, because I was trying to remember when I played it, and it seemed at that time like an infinite amount of time. Like, this game, should I even bother? This game's a year and a half old. And now I regularly don't get to games which then become my favourite games.
I think a year old is new.
That's a new game.
That's a new game.
Exactly.
Dave, what were you doing in 2005 in your life?
In my life, I was, I'd finished my A-levels. I was having a gap year for no real reason in particular. I didn't travel or anything. I don't know what I did with it. I worked at a job I hated.
Brilliant.
Which
that's not really a gap year.
No, which it was good to save some money. And several times I almost quit, and I kept reminding myself of the money that came in every month and how that was useful, and that kept me going, and I did stay employed until I went to university in September of 2005, and then I dropped out of university in January of 2006.
You sound like a real loser.
Yeah, I do.
But then you went back to university again after that.
I did, but we're only talking about 2005, really.
At this point, 2005, Dave. Terrible.
Oh. Yeah, so that's where I was in my life. And
did you play God of War that year?
No, I didn't. I did not play God of War. I mean, honestly, Nath, if you're gonna price the truth out of me,
okay.
I didn't play any of the original God of War games.
Whoa.
Well, we'll have the discussion of our experiences with God of War.
I feel like I've tripped down some agenda points there. Sorry.
In 2005, this might have been the best time of my life. I'd just finished my A-levels. It was the summer before I went to university.
Yeah.
I was falling in love with my now ex-girlfriend.
Wow.
Walking hand in hand in the park. The sun was out. I was making a film with my friend. We thought we were really cool.
I bet you were cool.
I had long hair.
Oh, what a time. 2005.
Yeah, it was good. And I was playing God of War. I was playing God of War.
Oh,
I didn't own it. My friend owned it and was like, "Come round."
That whole thing was like those TikToks.
Yeah,
it's 2005.
I can hear the echoey, nostalgic music.
You're walking in the park with the girl you're falling in love with.
Yeah,
you've got long hair. At home, you've got God of War.
2005 just feels cool. It felt like the future. It sounds cool. 2005 in a way that 2025.
What about 2004? Let's see which one is the coolest.
That still works.
Yeah, 2025 feels like a sci-fi setting.
It's like the year 2000s was still quite new then, and it was like, wow, we're in the year 2000.
We're a quarter of a way through this century now.
I know.
We only get games like God of War in the future, in the year 2005.
There's only 5 years of the 21st century that didn't have God of War in it.
That's true.
That's maths.
Well, let's talk about...
I was worried that you weren't going to have enough to say in this podcast.
Let's talk about our experiences with God of War. Can you remember the first time... I'll come to you first, Nate. Can you remember the first time you played the original God of War?
I can, yes, I can. I think I got someone from the magazine send me a copy, because I played it on like a promo version, and I remember I wasn't, I didn't know what to expect. I remember basically my big reaction was, "Oh, this is as good as everyone says." I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should have played this ages ago. That was my reaction. It was the smoothness. It was and just the kind of the playability. I was going to call it arcade, but I actually think the combat's a little bit more sophisticated than that. It's just really great feeling as a game. There's something really kind of so fluid. And like complicated, but without not just complicated enough. There's enough variety in the moves. I've got my own. I like, one of my favorite things to do was to put the right stick backwards and just make him do a little backflip. There's just like little. You get used to moving in a certain way and like performing just a little satisfaction of square square triangle, actually square 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 square. So yeah, the smoothness was a big thing. I remember just being kind of blown away by how well it played.
So you didn't play it when it came out?
No.
And had no experience with the original series?
No.
Were you aware of God of War? Were your friends talking about it? Was it a thing that you were jealously wanting?
Yeah, it's not that it passed me by in terms of its existence. I mean, it was everywhere. I did have friends who were playing it. Like I probably, touched it occasionally at someone's house or a university, obviously. PS2s everywhere and little gatherings and things like that, but I never got to sit with it really myself. But was I aware of it? Absolutely. It's a huge it was a huge deal. I was really drawn to what you're talking about, Nath. You can see just from seeing the game, the fluidity, you can see the game feel. There's so much in particularly in the design of the weaponry, that sort of the way that you can be very up close and sort of tearing enemies apart, and then also like dragging enemies towards you, the sort of big area of effect, the sweeping attacks. It's that interplay.
I'm so used to the Blades of Chaos, and they're so iconic for PlayStation now, that I had sort of forgotten that is the first. It's the noise, the little snick, like, and it is the range that it gives you, and it all plays into how, I guess, like a melee game where you don't have to always be completely up close to people, and especially the aerial stuff as well in the game, you can kind of launch people in the air, all added up to the smoothness.
Sure. And I'd never seen a camera move in a video game like I'd seen it move in God of War. I'd never seen the variety in ways with which you can kill enemies and the contextual way you can do it. This is the first time I remember encountering that in a game. This is par for the course in video games now. You hit an enemy a few times, a symbol will appear above their head, you press the button, you do a finishing move. This is the first time I really remember experiencing something like that, and the excitement whenever I saw that little circle appear above an enemy's head. Like, what's Kratos gonna do now? Oh my god, it was cool. And straight from the off, it starts, you're just on a boat, there's like flying enemies, and I think he like pulls them down and just yanks their wings off.
He does indeed, the harpies.
You're climbing the rigging, and he grabs an enemy and just like bashes their face into the rigging and then chucks them down. There's aggression and character in the way that he fights. There was storytelling within the action, which I hadn't really experienced before. When you're playing as Dante in Devil May Cry, it's up to you to be skillful enough to learn the moves and to pull off these combos, but quite often, especially early on in those games, you're just floundering about, you're not very good at them. Immediately with God of War, you look cool. All the time you look cool. Just the way he opens a treasure chest, there's aggression and strength in it, and he's like, and
he hates
stuff
everything.
flies out of it. It's the cliched way to describe Kratos in the original series, that he's just very angry. I think there's a little bit more to him than that. I think it's a bit of an oversimplification of his character. But there was so much in everything you did in that game. He doesn't just open things. He doesn't just attack. He's Kratos doing all of these things.
The stuff that you've said has reminded me, and we do come back to this like in our conversations again and again, that you take for granted the things which games at this time, not just God of War, but certainly God of War, was cementing in place. Like you said, you'd never seen a game do the things with the camera that God of War did, and it became a real calling card for the series, certainly by the time God of War 3 came around, but where it would have this dynamic range on the camera. It would basically scale in and out, and it would make you seem very small and give a scale. And you look at it now, and technically, obviously, it's been surpassed by other things, but even like you said, on that first level, for instance, there are sections where you will dive into the flooded bows of a ship, and it's just not somewhere you'd think to go on a more on rails action hack and slasher.
No.
And just small ways of opening up the world. And I guess this is the DNA. So like the new version of God of War on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 has been so successful at being a very sophisticated modern game while incorporating, interestingly, so many of the things of the old game. And I guess that some of these have been brought into that new DNA, but you just forget how revolutionary it was. Like the blades were revolutionary, that sense of scale was revolutionary, and you're right, the character was revolutionary. And with lots of conversation in comparison between the old and the new game about what kind of hero Kratos is, and it's just a marker of the time, probably, and maybe of the journey of video games, that he was not just, you're right, he isn't just angry back then, but how the new games take that and incorporate it into what they're doing with their storytelling. But again, on that first level, there's you smash up the Hydra, and the ship's captain is just it's so funny. It's like he's in the throat of the Hydra. Yeah. and you go in and you like grab him by the key that you actually want, and you lift him up, and then you just let him go again. Like
he's there. It's like, oh, thank God you saved it. And you just yank the key off.
I wasn't
and
saving it.
Kratos has got him, and he just lets him drop. Hilariously, you meet him later on in the game when you fall into hell. You fall into Hades.
Yeah.
And he's there, the ship's captain. He's desperately trying to climb his way back out. Yeah. And Kratos, to save himself, kicks the ship's captain further down. And he's like, you again! Ah! It's just so funny.
But that's a great idea.
I remember on everyone loves a menu screen that goes straight into gameplay.
Yes.
And I really thought this was like a PS4. I don't know where I've been asleep. But in refreshing my memory for this podcast, played the opening of the original God of War, and it's cool. It's got half of his face on the side of the screen, and then you press start, and it zooms back, and he just starts talking about how mad he is about the gods. The gods have abandoned me. I can't do Kratos, obviously, but he's super mad. And then the incredibly heavily memed, just stepping off. The first thing he does is step off a giant cliff, and falls. To an Aerosmith plays only on the internet, but Aerosmith does play. An incredible opening. And I remember at that time, again, just the sophistication of the storytelling, just not really like, oh, we've started in one place and we've gone back to another place. Even that, it's new for me.
It was the way you move through the levels. Like, again, at that time, you'd do a level, you'd move to the next level, you'd move to the next level. Within that first Hydra fight set piece, you're moving through various areas that would traditionally be, oh, here's the next environment. But they're all sort of hooked together in a way that makes you feel like you're constantly barreling through this continuous set piece, even though it's been stitched together at the seams. We're on PS2 here. Right. But you're fighting outside, you go inside, you're inside the bowels of the ship, the Hydra's head smashes through, you have a little fight with the Hydra inside, you're flung outside again, and it ends with you fighting the Hydra and impaling it on the ship's mast with your blades of chaos, and then you go inside the Hydra's mouth, grab the key, and you go into the next area. The rain's lashing down, you're climbing the rigging, there's stuff fighting you up above, below, there's flying harpies. Unbelievable.
It feels like you said, like a continual kind of cinematic sequence that you're involved in.
I mean, to give you some context, some of the other games that came out on PS2 in 2005. I mean, there's some bangers, to be fair.
Wait. FIFA 04.
No, it'd be FIFA 6.
God damn it! I was trying to,
come on, man.
But all
my
year.
God.
No, fine. I should have just said FIFA 5. Anyway, what else was there?
Any other guesses?
I should know this. I was there. The
Shadow of the Colossus?
Yes.
Oh, yes. What a game.
Godfather game come out that year?
It might have done, but I've not got it written down. I'll just tell you the ones I've got written down.
Okay.
Resident Evil 4 came out on PS2 this year.
It's pretty good.
One of the best games of all time.
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, so the re-release of Metal Gear Solid 3 that introduced Metal Gear Online, which I played for a long time. Guitar Hero came out November 2005.
Okay.
What a year!
Yeah.
We're introduced to Kratos and Guitar Hero. So many games that I would argue have revolutionized the medium of video games.
Yeah.
Resi 4, incredibly... I mean, Resi 4 and God of War together, you think about the journey both of those have been on, like Resi 4 almost pioneering this slightly to the side, over the shoulder perspective for all action games.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
you think of what modern God of War is like. It's got that sort of perspective with the DNA of old God of War in it.
Yeah.
Those two games both coming out in the same year. Burnout Revenge for you, Nath.
Nice.
Did you play Burnout Revenge?
I played it a little bit. Yeah, it was basically Burnout 4.
And Gran Turismo 4 was actually the best-selling game on PS2 in 2005. So yeah, just a little flavour of what else was around.
What
a great year.
It was, wasn't it? Nath, do you have like a specific scene or bit from the first God of War game that sticks in your mind that you really remember?
Not from the first one. I think I honestly think the opening, like that transition from the menu, but I haven't played them for so long. I think 1 and 2 in that era, and I replayed them on PS3 when the HD collection came out, and I haven't gone back to them since. So they're all, I've just got a really long sort of bellowing smear of memory of the whole thing.
I remember that spike tower at the end, man. Do you remember climbing the rotating spike tower?
Yeah.
Flipping hard as hell.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where you go into Pandora's temple, I think.
Is that the logs for that? Was that?
It's a really long, thin, spiky tower with spikes, and you go through sections of it, and the sections, one section will rotate clockwise, then you go to the next section, it'll be anti-clockwise, and you're just trying to avoid all the spikes.
As you know, I'm a very patient gamer, so I was probably fine.
But I remember going into Pandora's temple, like this really elaborate puzzle sequence, because that's another thing we often forget about God of War, especially in this first series, quite elaborate puzzles that you would be stuck on for quite a while. And I remember just being in Pandora's temple for what felt like hours, like fighting these monsters, trying to work out how the heck I was going to get through. I think it ends with in a boss fight against a Minotaur. And then you open Pandora's box, and what's inside is the power for Kratos to become enormous. And he grows huge, so he's the same size as Ares, and they have a massive fight.
Wow.
Two enormous.
Weirdly, of all of that, I remember Pandora's. I remember the maze and the enemies coming into like an area and then fighting the Minotaur. I remember that being a really hard fight, and then I just remember him shouting Ares. Ares. Really hated Ares.
You've got that scene, of course, where we discover the origins of the white ash on Kratos' skin, and this is a scene that he then references and talks about to Freya in God of War Ragnarok. The tragedy of him being so corrupted and possessed by Ares and his bloodlust that he ends up killing his wife and daughter. And as punishment, the ash from their burned bodies is seared onto his skin as a reminder of the terrible thing that he did.
It's very video games, isn't it?
I like that. Harsh.
Very harsh. So that's why he hates the gods.
He probably deserved it.
But there was like I remember him killing Ares by just shoving an enormous sword through his face.
Yes.
And then we see like the death of a god.
That was, I remember again, like that striking me as extraordinary. And by God of War 3, you're killing loads of gods all the time.
Yes.
But I just remember thinking, this is ridiculous. Like, oh, how am I going to be able to
kill the god?
He's massive, and then I guess you get massive, and you're like,
that's right.
half the job is
his
done.
weakness is another massive man. The game ends, I think, with you sitting on Ares' throne, and you being proclaimed the god of war, and you're like, I've done it now. And then God of War 2 happens, and you immediately off the throne, jumping off and killing some more people.
Yep.
So moving along then, do you have any memories of God of War 2? So God of War 2 follows on PS2 in 2007, released just after the PS3 released. So God of War 2 is like the swan song of PlayStation 2.
Interesting.
I don't remember the set.
timing.
I remember the set piece at the beginning of this game where you're just flying on Pegasus, the winged horse, and again thinking,
the winged horse.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, that was...
You're just flying through clouds, and there's other things, obviously, you're fighting. You're not just flying through.
This is almost certainly the reason that I went back and played 1, was that I didn't realise that was the timing. So I was back in games and probably very excited about.
I do remember thinking that I was lucky enough to get a PS3, I think, in the first year that it came out. And even then, God of War 2, despite being a PS2 game, was easily standing up next to all the new PS3 games.
Yeah.
Just looked unbelievable.
I'd say these days, generational transitions feel smoother. That was the jump between PS2 and PS3 was...
It was big.
Visually was extraordinary. But then you always have the audiences have those communities have those conversations about launch titles of... They often look impressive, but maybe they don't play as well as. And then the contrast is always when a team has been working on the same bit of hardware for as long as everyone have been working on PlayStation 2. Very, very often you get those climactic generational kind of markers, and it's interesting to kind of compare them. I remember us in the office looking at the launch titles for PS3 coming in and just having them on a massive screen in 720 and just being like, this is amazing. But
I remember Motorstorm
that was
like
incredible.
the best looking thing I'd ever seen.
But then the playability, I mean, again, of God of War, which was just its absolute kind of superpower anyway.
God of War 2, I remember a distinct memory is them doing marble floors so flipping well.
Reflection,
the shine on both the shine of the marble floor and the way the light moved as you moved across it and the camera tracked across it, and Kratos' footsteps, that really lovely, solid, clonky, echoey feel, the sound that you get when you're running across a marble floor.
What was Kratos' big objective in God of War 2?
I can't remember. He hates Zeus. This is where the Zeus thing starts. So the big thing that happens at the start is you fight the Colossus of Rhodes in another enormous set piece, massive golden statue thing.
Right. Yeah.
And Zeus comes down and he's sick of Kratos' nonsense. He's like, disobedient, won't fall in line, and so you have a big fight with Zeus and he takes all of Kratos' godly powers away. So the thrust of it is you got to get all your powers back.
You can't, because you can't be massive. Do you know what I mean? You can't. It's a classic power strip at the beginning of a game.
Yeah.
Oh, remember, I just God of War 2. I'm going to be massive.
But I also remember just really enjoying there being a dog enemy, and that the finishing move on the dogs was Kratos just kicking them like a football.
Cerberus?
No, it wasn't Cerberus, and my dad finding this really funny. There's another dog over there, kick that one. It was great. And then we had, before God of War 3 on PS3, I didn't play this, Chains of Olympus on PSP in 2008. Did you play this, Nate?
Yeah, I did. I reviewed this, and again, hazy memories, and this isn't one I've replayed, but it was there are two handheld games, and they were both really, really strong, like probably among the better titles on PSP overall. And I think, again, like the kind of technical challenge of a game as fluid and as kind of blockbustery as God of War, I think there was tons of talk about how they would condense it into PSP. But yeah, like it was just smaller.
And then I think probably this is where I think the transition into what we think of as God of War nowadays happened. In 2010, God of War 3 came out on PS3, the first time we'd seen it on PS3. And it was, you thought of it as this graphical powerhouse on PS2. everyone incredibly excited to see what Kratos and God of War could achieve on PS3.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, man, they really are just going for it massively with the ambition and the scale of the fights. This is the one where you fight, is it Kronos, the Titan?
Yeah.
And he's there squeezing Kratos between his fingers,
yes.
and you hack his fingernail off.
It was like a joke. And like I said, I'd quite recently played, maybe 2-3 years before, I'd played through. It'd be interesting to know when the HD remasters came out as well, like, because I would have replayed them at that point. So I had that quite fresh, and then had gone to review God of War 3 for the mag. So I went to Santa Monica Studio and I got to play it there because the builds were so, like, the versions of the game they were creating were like so off the production line that they didn't have time to like send them out to us in the UK. And the things I remember are just almost laughing at the scale. I think there was a few other games which had done, that I had in my head, which were doing kind of similar things in terms of like, how can you take the, I guess, hack slash genre. At the time, the big one before I played God of War was Prince of Persia.
Yes.
And like Prince of Persia again, the dynamism of the camera, and it just gave a kind of a sense of scale and cinematicness to things. But God of War 3 just being ridiculous. Like you say, you've already kind of gone right to the end. Just you start running up like Kronos' arm, and you'll do like a fight on his forearm or whatever. And one part of a fight, you lever off one of his fingernails,
yes.
and then you squeeze tiny. Like the idea, like that Kronos is as big as Kratos normally is on screen at certain points, and Kratos is like in between his fingers. It was like a joke version of the way that they could do scale. Also, hadn't lost any of the playability, and in fact, there was tons of like new powers and weapons to use. And I just remember thinking that it was such a brilliant transition. I don't know if it had the impact at the time because
well, it's hard,
those
isn't
first
it?
two games were so strong.
In terms of the impact, I don't think. Well, I would argue 2018 God of War, which we'll get onto in a second,
Right. That's
probably had as much of an impact, if not more, than the very first God of War.
I agree.
But yeah, God of War 3 was the ultimate culmination of that first ambition of God of War as a series, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
The variety, you fight Hercules, you beat into a pulp with his own gloves, I think, and then you get to use the gloves later on. The game opens with you fighting Poseidon,
Yes.
and killing him.
Tons of watery horses.
Yes,
That's amazing.
and there's a fight. Is it Helios, the god who he just rips his head off?
Yeah.
And then you can use Helios's head to like blind enemies after that.
Yes.
By just,
And it's who gets the eyes, the thumbs in the eyes?
I
That's
think
the Hermes, yeah, but he might not.
I think it might be Poseidon who gets that.
I think it might be him because I think he's really quick because he's a messenger
that's
of the
right,
gods,
yeah.
and he's running around and grabbing him is like
And he's taunting Kratos the entire time. Like, you can't catch me, but you can catch him.
turns out he was actually incorrect.
Yes,
And then you can go fast.
yeah,
It's
you can.
great.
It's
video games.
But it just that God of War 3 just barrels along, and it's like, now fight this, now fight Hades, now fight, and now he fights Zeus at the end.
It's like Kill Bill, but with the pantheon of Greek gods. It's like, we're going to ramp through them.
Just crossing them all off the list. Then also later in 2010, Ghost of Sparta, the second PSP game, came out. Again, I did not play that. You've already said about Chains of Olympus, Nath. Do you remember anything specific about Ghost of Sparta?
No, again, it was really good, but smaller than the games that you play on your telly. That's my big memory.
And then the PS3 swan song for God of War was in 2013. Another game I am ashamed to say I have not played. Although I played a little bit of it because we were working on Access at the time.
Yes.
God of War Ascension, which brought in multiplayer for the first time. But I never went through the campaign of this.
I think that's probably something which is relatively of its time in terms of how many games developers were exploring online. Does our game work online? And I think the fact that God of War has become so successful not online kind of answers that question. Like, yes, explore it. This is where we are at this moment in the industry. Everyone's looking at multiplayer. Maybe not a brilliant fit for the strengths of God of War in the end.
And then, Dave, we're going to hear from you now.
He's been waiting.
My time.
He's been charging up.
Dave's time to shine. Well, I think that I want to talk about the E3 reveal of this first.
We've got to talk about the E3
This is
reveal.
E3 2016.
We never stopped talking about
E3 2016. We were there probably when I finally retire and look back on my favourite memories from doing this job, I think this E3 conference will be
right up there.
Right up there. Dave, set the scene for us. Take us. What happened?
Well, we were in a theatre. We were in LA, which is where E3 took place, and the PlayStation conference would usually take place in a kind of a big arena of some kind, usually out of town. And this time it was in a slightly different, more of a theatre, as I recall.
Was it the Dolby Theatre?
Was it the Dolby Theatre?
If it wasn't that year, it was a different year.
And we were in this. It was a very lovely theatre, and it had a live orchestra that were playing as we walked in. Some music that I didn't recognise, but it was nice. I like live music, and it was
right.
It was.
This is nice.
It was unusual. Obviously, we're an official part of PlayStation, and sometimes at E3s we would have a hint as to what might be being announced at the E3 conference. And I remember this conference in particular, we didn't know anything. We were not expecting any. We had no idea.
I think that we might have been told something like, it's going to be a good one.
Possibly. I remember sitting there not really knowing what to expect, but certainly I wasn't expecting what happened. And as I recall, obviously with the live orchestra, it was the very first thing to be announced at the conference. And it's a very famous cuts. It's brilliant. I mean, I always wondered, did they write the game? Did they write this scene for this E3 reveal? Because it's like the perfect reveal.
It's like where there's lines for the trailer that you get in movies.
Yeah, exactly.
But how can we be the event?
Yeah, exactly. And it was so perfect to have the actual the live orchestra there performing the score to this scene. And obviously you start with Atreus, and he goes to the door of the cabin, and there's someone in there. It's very, very dark, and you can't really see, and they come to the door, and there's that some people are hoping that they know what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Some people are starting to see what they're seeing.
Yeah.
There's like an energy is like, that we're not being shown this character because the reveal is going to be good. And, so everyone's starting to like take note at this point of like, this is going to be big. This is something big's happening. And obviously he steps into the light, and it was just like incredible. Like the energy in the room was incredible.
What's embarrassing is like we've been lucky enough to be at those E3 moments often, and most of the time, I mean, I've been doing this job for 20 years, and most of the time I know what's going on, and I'm embarrassed to say I was like, who's that guy? Who's that guy with a beard? I don't understand. And then I think the music, I don't know what happened. I came to my senses quite quickly.
And then there was like a good chunk of gameplay. It wasn't just like, you'd think a reveal of that scale, that could have been it. That could have been it. God of War is back. Boom. And we're like, whoa, what's it like? God, what's happening? Interesting. But we saw a good chunk of gameplay of this like whole new, and it's such a reimagining in lots of ways in terms of the gameplay, in terms of the character. The setting is obviously completely different. It's such an incredible smashing together of these two different worlds. I think it's second to none in how cleverly done and how tastefully done that is. But yeah, this reveal was incredible. We got to see a really massive chunk of gameplay that was it had everything you want. It looked so good. You could see that same fluid combat that we were talking about from the DNA of God of War.
Yeah.
The new camera angle, the new setting, and Atreus and his part in this, and just Kratos being a dad.
Yeah.
It had everything. It was an incredible reveal. And I think, we were especially lucky to be in the room for it, but had I been just streaming that at home,
I could have just seen who it was on the internet straight away.
I would have been thrilled.
Yeah, it was something special. And I think, there are a handful of games. We've talked about Resi 4, maybe the original God of War as well. You'd probably talk about Demon's Souls, games that have shaped and influenced how games afterwards have been made.
Yeah.
God of War 2018, you'd have to argue, is right up there with one of them. Like the influence it's had on the action adventure genre in general since its release.
Well, it's funny, isn't it?
Quite profound.
Because definitely they've spoken about this a lot in the studio and the team behind the game, but that you can definitely see that the era of PS3, which well, I guess maybe mostly PS4, but that era in the middle anyway, between the gap between God of War 3 and God of War 2018 was where we'd arrived in a new era of gaming where, with that maybe a bit of an emphasis on storytelling, a huge influence from Naughty Dog in Uncharted and The Last of Us. And, they've spoken about you can't bring that version of Kratos back, or it's okay for Kratos to be Kratos and for God of War to be God of War in 2005. It needs more if it's going to achieve the same kind of like defining position, as you said. And the amount of questions you have to answer and have brilliant answers for when you're doing that. Like you've got, they bring back like you said, that the combat is obviously underneath vastly different, but has a feel and maybe like you were saying, Rob, it's like an attitude and there's storytelling in it, and the story being told is a slightly different story now. So, and like you said, he's a father, and what does that mean? It's kind of like almost starting with, you're going to make the next God of War game. It's kind of like, what does that even give me? Do you know what I mean? Like there's so much that we have to rediscover and bridge between now and then.
Yeah.
And like I think that you're right, and it obviously was a follow-up to a period of gaming which had tried to do more with storytelling and character, and then, like you said, also set the scene for what we've had since.
We're of course this is the first, maybe God of War Ascension, but the first God of War after The Last of Us, which I feel, in terms of how you can tell storytelling, in terms of the sophistication of acting and performance capture in video games, there's an expectation that is beyond what God of War has been able to achieve up until that point. It's not just about the camera zooming out and making Kratos look small. Quite a lot of the time, the camera in 2018 God of War is pushed right into his face.
Yes.
We're looking at Kratos' eyes rather than his tiny speck of a torso being crushed by a titan.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot is said without dialogue in this game. Like, it's a whole different way to approach the storytelling of it. You've got, and I think it was an incredibly brave thing to do. And I can imagine being at Santa Monica Studio whilst they're making God of War 2018, being at best nervous about, oh my God, are people going to like this? Does this work? It's so vastly different to what God of War has been before.
Yeah.
And what they make is arguably one of the greatest games ever made.
It's so admirable that the number of leaps that they took, leaps of faith, leaps of technology. Like, if you asked, I don't know how it works, were they asked to make a new God of War? Did they ask if they could, to make at the time sort of next generation of God of War? I would have such a simple version of, my attempt would be like, it just looks better.
Prettier,
like maybe the camera's in a different, they added so much. And one thing we should mention,
Kratos has a dog now.
One thing we should mention, interesting, you mentioned the camera in the original God of War. Obviously, the camera in 2018 God of War, not only is it in a different position and you have control of it in a different way, but the game is one shot. There are no cuts in the camera.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is an incredible thing to do. And that's similarly linked to what you were saying about the menu, Nath, going straight from the menu into the game.
Yeah.
This game is one shot effectively the whole way through, and sometimes you have control, mostly you have control of the camera, but it'll go to a cutscene, but that camera is always there, which is a huge technical feat, but it's a huge feat of direction and that again, taking a stride in a different direction, trying to make you feel something different by putting you there.
It's a weird one because it's also a very substantial game.
Yeah,
and the story on its own lasts for a long time, and then there's tons of other stuff you can do. So I didn't realize that until it was like one of those facts that I enjoyed in retrospect. So I was like, there's not a cut, and I was like.
Trying to think of a time where there was.
I think that honestly, I think that is probably. The people who implemented it might disagree, but I think that's one of the highest compliments you can give it. Genuinely, if you're not noticing that's because you're so invested in it. That's the whole point, is to make you invested in it. I was also glad
it was pointed out. I was like, because that is impressive. And it did have an impact on my playthrough, But obviously you're breaking up your playthrough because I had to, go to bed and things during them. So I would turn the PlayStation off. So I guess I was putting my own breaks in the game, and
True.
that's what made me go like,
that's true.
No, there were, but no, there weren't.
I
breaks.
absolutely do think it impacts your memory of the game, your enjoyment of the game, where you feel about it, and whether you conscious of it or not. I feel certain that it does, and it's such a cool. Again, it's so how much easier it is to just put cameras in a place in a game to cut a cutscene together. This person's talking. As soon as you're doing it with one camera the whole way through, and you have to go seamlessly from gameplay into a cutscene and make it dynamic and exciting, that's such a headache that I wouldn't have given myself if I was in charge of directing this game.
Let's do another shot.
I really want to go with the dog idea.
Top down dog, just really good looking game. And,
I think I'm right about this, guys.
Fine.
I'm right about this.
That's a 9 out of 10 everywhere.
I want to say just for there is, because a couple of things that you're talking about being in the studio and where they are. There is that documentary which is on the PlayStation YouTube channel, like the main PlayStation YouTube channel, called Raising Kratos.
Yes.
Which is a brilliant kind of look at some of those stresses and some of the relationship between Shigeru Yoshida, who was head of Worldwide Studios at that time, and the development team. And obviously it's all worked out very nicely, but it's very interesting to go and get a kind of peek behind the curtain.
So Kratos has changed, the setting has changed, the combat has changed. The other big thing that changed was no Blades of Chaos, at least at the start. We get the Leviathan axe, which is another bold move, because we're talking about one of the most iconic weapons of video game history. And when you think about how video game fandoms react to their favourite things being altered,
they're very reasonable.
It's a brave move, but everyone immediately, I think, as soon as you get to play with the Leviathan axe, there's no weapon like it. You're throwing it away, you're catching it, you're bringing it back. The feel in the controller when you...
The wood noise when it hits your hand is just the best thing. It's so good. Like you were saying, Dave, the amount of things we've all been saying that you realise that it's actually taking from that original game is more philosophical almost than anything kind of technical. It's Kratos, it's the name, and it's a kind of a vibe which is inspiring a lot of things. But when you're in the position of going, like, imagining your pretend man top-down dog guy, he's trying to pitch this game, and it's like, and you can't have the Blades of Chaos. Just come up with something as good and iconic as the Blades of Chaos, which people are going to be talking about in 10 or 15 years time.
I mean, even if you pitch that, he's got an axe. He's got an axe, you can throw it, you can catch it.
Yeah.
And it's cold.
It's a cool
and
one.
You can freeze
things.
But they obviously iterated on how that feels in your hands, how it feels to hit something with that axe. You can't really describe it, and it's used in puzzle solving as well. Very early on in the game, you're throwing the axe at switches and levers and freezing them, and the way in which it just stays persistently in the world wherever you throw it. It will stay there, and you can run quite far away from it, and you can call it back, and sometimes it'll take a few seconds if it's far away. And you just hear it, and you know it's coming, and Kratos has it again.
Do you know what?
Brilliant.
One of the big tricks that 2018 pulled off was, I did not think... I was enjoying, probably because of how good the Leviathan axe was, I was enjoying it so much, and at a certain point I'd stopped thinking about the Blades of Chaos, and I didn't think we were getting them back. And then, I mean, obviously spoilers for everything, when you get them back, the moment is, if that had happened, I don't know, so many different versions of that moment where you're like, at last, or yeah, of course, and instead I was like, oh my god. And also I sort of didn't want them because of where Kratos was.
So good that it puts you in that emotional state because of how Kratos feels about them. In fact, one of the first things you see in the game, he's wrapped bandages around where the Blades of Chaos were seared to him before.
I do want, I mean, maybe we should have a discussion about this. How exactly do they join his arms? Do you know what I mean? And when he throws them, how do they come back? It's like they're on springs. Maybe.
He's just really good with them.
Okay,
really good.
He's a god.
In the first series, you see them; they're literally seared, or they're burnt onto him. They are joined to him.
Link,
just like a chain wrapped around his wrist.
But then it goes long.
There's like obviously springy bits in it.
All right.
Don't worry about it.
Nath, you're off the team. You're off the team. You're not.
There's so much story in this as well. Like he has to get I can't remember the specific reason now, but to save Atreus, basically, he has to go back and retrieve the Blades of Chaos, he has to use them. He doesn't want to because he wants to move on from this awful past.
Yeah.
He wants to leave it behind, everything that he's done, terrible things that he's done. But he's got the Blades of Chaos hidden under a floorboard in his cabin. They're just there.
There's like an old Western feel to that. It's like one-time gunslinger goes and retrieves his weapon from like he's buried it. It's
so it's exciting to get them back, but you're also really feeling for Kratos. And for the shame of me, I can't remember the name of the character, the character who comes back at that moment, who he, I think, imagines, who is talking to him, like the statue of the Greek goddess. Athena, yes. And she's saying to him, she gives him the line, "You are and always will be a monster."
Yeah.
And instead of getting angry about it, Kratos is just, "I know."
Oh.
And the music just is slowly building up. But then you get the Blades of Chaos and the game is like, go on then. Here you go. You step out of the cavern, it just a little present. Some Draugr wrapped up, ready to be killed. Who I think you've struggled to fight. You've been sort of like trudging your way through snow, trying to get back to your cabin. The Leviathan axe isn't working on this new type of Draugr for some reason. You're like, oh man. You kind of hate these Draugr because you can't easily kill them. Then you get the Blades of Chaos.
Such good manipulation, isn't it? Positioning of the player.
It's so satisfying to carve those guys up.
It is having its cake and eating it a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
But do you know
delicious
what?
Cake.
I like cake. Cake is nice.
And then 2022, then we get God of War Ragnarok on both PS4 and PS5. I don't think anything can ever match the impact of God of War 2018, but the way they refined that formula, the way they just expanded everything and grew everything. I think, again, we're starting to see this quite a lot in RPGs now. There's like, the lines between linear action games and open world RPGs are sort of becoming blurred.
Yeah.
So Kratos is this character who you can level up, you can improve his armor, you can upgrade his armor and weaponry. And you wouldn't describe God of War Ragnarok as open world, but there's an explorable size to each of the realms in God of War Ragnarok.
Definitely.
That makes, and there's like a richness to it. It's so designed. I think quite often in open world you get just big bowls of trees and mountains and rivers, and it's big and open and it's filled with stuff, filled with side quests. But in God of War Ragnarok, it's smaller probably than your typical open world, but so rich, so
purposeful.
You can there's that final area towards the end game of God of War Ragnarok where it really opens up into this massive thing that I don't think I've ever explored anything quite like it. You just see this big open space initially, probing it and going underneath it and going through the tunnels and gradually peeling back this area, finding all of the boss fights in it. I thought it was remarkable. Really remarkable. And just wrapped that story up in a really epic and satisfying way, very emotional way as well.
I felt like it had more I guess to our point about kind of performance and character and what they were doing in 2018. I found there was much more kind of humor and warmth in the follow-up in Ragnarok, and obviously kind of like another kind of extension of the combat and the options that you have, and the Draupnir spear, and which became my favorite.
Oh, the spear! Imagine bringing a third weapon in there and it being as fun to use as the other two.
It's not as famous as the Leviathan axe.
No,
that is a hard trick to pull off twice.
But when I got that spear, I was like, "Oh, that's nice." Enjoy being third favourite to the Leviathan axe and the Blades of Chaos. And then in actual fights, like, I'm getting the spear out. It's amazing.
But then I was going to say to your point earlier about the kind of Blades of Chaos and the contrast of this is an important moment and he's sad about getting the Chaos Blades, and then you go outside and you're like, yeah, Chaos Blades. And then in the next game it's kind of similar, where you're constantly thinking about his past and who he doesn't want to be, and like, you'll always be a monster, I know. But then like the Thor is so good at winding him up. All I wanted, like, where's this God of War? Where's this God of War? It's like, just please, just let me beat this man up, please. And the game is, I guess, it's just fantastic at walking that line.
That scene's fantastic when Thor comes in. The secret ending in 2018, or not secret ending, but like, the post-credit scene in 2018 God of War, where you see this mysterious figure knocking on Kratos' door. You see the hammer and the lightning, and you know who it is.
Yeah.
And then we've been waiting like 4 years, and then pretty early on in the game, it's like, okay, have a fight with Thor, and it's flipping amazing. Within like the first hour, you're fighting Thor. But I loved the whole sort of the party dynamic of. It's not just Atreus you're exploring with, playable Atreus as well.
Yeah.
That was incredibly cool. But I was coming back to like Freya's storyline.
Oh yeah,
was brilliant as well. So many times I was surprised in that story, just so hooked by it. I remember playing it and just having WhatsApp conversations with other people in the office who were playing it at the time. Have you got to this bit yet? Have you got to that fight yet? Just being forgetting all of the technical storytelling brilliance, just being so hooked on what was happening. I just couldn't put it down.
And then another layer, it going for the platinum of the fights that you would have through the game, the kind of extra challenge fights.
Oh yeah,
those I think were the most. I don't know if they're just really well pitched for everyone, and I am incredibly average, or what. But I found them to be just at the point of, I'm not going to play this anymore, but then I am actually obviously going to play it until I've defeated them all. I loved them. I thought, I mean, Valkyrie fights in the first game similar, like just so much fun.
I'm too much of a coward, unfortunately, to go and fight all the Valkyries, and it's fine. That's also a perfectly valid way to play it. I finished the story. I beat all the story bosses.
It is. I'm just thinking about you 2 days ago downstairs shouting, "I am good at games."
I am.
Right. Okay.
I'm not saying I can't. I can do it. I've just chosen not to until now. I have the ability for sure. If you can do it, I can do it.
All right, good. I look forward to it.
Good.
I believe in you.
In another 20 years.
What did you make of God of War Ragnarok, Dave?
Oh, I don't know what I can add, to be honest. I think, again, it's an unenviable task, really, following up God of War. And they did it. And as we said, they expanded on everything. They like a surprising amount, really. It wasn't just bigger and better. I mean, I do think Draupnir is a big deal. It's not... perhaps not as revolutionary as the Leviathan axe, but also it's like a weapon you get quite late on in the game, and it still has such a different like skill set and abilities. You can, and you know, I love the feel of it, the speed of it, the way that you can use it to like ping in the distance. Playing with Atreus again, and I think the story, the big twist in the story, massively got me. I was really didn't see that coming, and I was like mouth open, sort of no way at it, which is, you know, I loved that. I loved being so surprised by Odin's betrayal. I don't know, it's not a betrayal. We didn't know it was him. It was fantastic.
Do you know, I felt sad because I'd really liked, is it Heimdall?
Yeah.
I'd really liked Heimdall.
No, Heimdall's... You didn't like Heimdall.
No, I hate Heimdall.
Yeah,
Heimdall's the horrible, cocky one.
Tyr.
Yeah.
I'd really like Tyr.
Yeah.
And he just seemed chill.
That's why I said betrayal, because I liked Tyr, but it was never Tyr.
No, it's like Mad Eye Moody.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly like that.
It was never
I still like Mad Eye Moody. No, you don't.
You've never met him. You don't know who he is.
Never met him. I honestly, like that... Oh... I'd love to have seen just a video of me playing that bit. It was such a good reveal, I
wrenching.
thought.
Do you know what I think?
It was very wrenching.
The most impressive bit in God of War Ragnarok was the fight in the ale house, is it, in Valhalla as Atreus?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Choreographed so magnificently as well. I was like, just a little bit of, so unnecessary, just a little thing that could have been throwaway. You just have a fight in this pub, basically.
Yeah.
But it's so good.
Yeah.
So well done. I thought it was brilliant.
They know what they're doing.
They really do.
This has made me want to replay. If you could replay a God of War, well, you can. Which one would you replay first, do you think?
Oh,
having had a little taste of the first God of War.
Yeah.
I kind of want to run through it. I think there's a version which I haven't got the trophies for. You know what I mean? Like one of the platform re-releases.
I think Dave's got to play it.
I mean, talking about it has
do you know what would
made
be
me
interesting?
want to.
Would be like, as coming to it pretty fresh, would be to see you play it and what you know. I think you'd be surprised. And I think the thing about that I think is most sort of impressive really about the span of 20 years, like video game anniversaries, we as there are more of them, I guess, and as they seem more and more kind of surprising, I think because there's this generation of people who've been really invested in games as a hobby, and they've carried that forward into their lives, and then you kind of go like, was that really, oh no way, was like Dead Space really 15 years ago? It's more than that now, Nath. How long is it? It's
17 years ago?
17 years ago, yeah, ages. The reinvention, and impressive for all the reasons that we've talked about, but just in terms of what games are now, and like there are fewer of them really, and they tend to be bigger, or like on the level of like a first party kind of exclusive, like a big game. There are few of them, and they are bigger bets, and there are so many that haven't made the transition in the same way that God of War has, because there is, which limited time, and things change and tastes change, and they're still there and part of the history. But for God of War to kind of remain relevant in the way that it has, just like, I don't know, I can't help but see in the contrast between that first game and Ragnarok. I guess it really neatly encompasses the time that I've been kind of professionally engaged with games, and you do forget how far we've come, but how much fun, how much pleasure I can take in the simplicity of relative simplicity of like an earlier God of War. That's why I liked games in the first place. They were fun, and what games can be now, and what they have what they bring.
Very well put. I think we've run out of time, unfortunately. If you are listening to this, if you're watching this on YouTube, please do let us know in the comments what your experiences are, what your memories of God of War are. Can you believe it's been 20 years? I'm not sure I can.
I can now. We've been talking about it
we
for
have,
hours.
Indeed. Please do stick around on the channel. We've got loads more coming up on the YouTube channel. Otherwise, we will be back in another 2 weeks' time for the next episode of the PlayStation Access podcast. We'll see you then.
PlayStation